guys. So, if you are on track with us, then you should be around day 8 of reading My Survival, A Girl on Schindler's List. And today we're not going to read a chapter, we're going to do an extension task. And I encourage you guys to do this if you feel like you're able to, at least go through the presentation and try a little bit of it and see what you can do. Okay, so today I'm going to present through and do a little bit of a model, and I think you guys should have the tools to complete this assignment. All right. Okay, so we're on day 8, Friday, April 24th, and we're not going to read a chapter today. We're going to do an explanatory writing extension task. So we still have an objective, but our letters are different. Why is there a W there instead of an RI, which we've been seeing all this week and all last week? What does the W stand for? Writing. You guys have 3 major writing standards in 4th grade. There are a couple of others behind it, but there are 3 major ones. We're going to talk about the differences. But today we're going to talk about the 2nd writing standard of 4th grade. So our objective is I can write an explanatory essay to examine a topic and convey ideas clearly. All right, ready? Mirrors on. I can write an explanatory essay to examine a topic and convey ideas clearly. Mirrors off. Okay. So obviously we know what it means to write. What's an explanatory essay? What does that mean? What's an explanatory essay? And then what do we mean if we're examining a topic? We're just looking at one topic and thinking deeply about it, right? And then conveying ideas. It's like to show ideas. We're trying to explain ideas clearly. Those ideas are going to be our claims that we're going to take when we write. Right? All right, explanatory essay. Think about what that means. All right, so types of writing. We have opinion writing, explanatory writing, and narrative writing. What are the differences? Well, when we talk about opinion writing, we're being asked our opinion. What do you think about this? There's not really a right or wrong answer. There are usually 2 stances that you can take, sometimes more. What is your opinion on something? Do you think that this was done well? Do you believe this or that? Then we have explanatory writing, which is what we're going to do right now. Look at that word, explanatory. What word do you see in there? Explain, right? When we write an explanatory essay, we are explaining something. We're answering a question. We're writing to inform a reader. And then we have narrative writing, which is when we write to tell a story. We have a beginning, a middle, and an end. There isn't really a question. A lot of times we're retelling a story, doing something like that. All right, so the strategy that we use at Hazel Park is called the better answer strategy. When can we use the better answer strategy? With which type of writing? Think in your head right now. Which type of writing or types of writing can we use the better answer strategy for? We can use it for opinion writing. We can use it for explanatory writing. We cannot use it for narrative writing. So we will be using better answer strategy today. All right, let's review our better answer strategy. My favorite thing to teach, it really is. So in the better answer strategy, we think about that hamburger. We have our top bun, which is our restate and our gist. We have a transition and evidence, transition and explanation, transition and evidence, transition and explanation. Then we have a conclusion, which is our transition and a restate. Now, really, in 4th grade, you guys should be writing 2 whole better answer strategy paragraphs. If you have really been in my classroom every day, then you should be able to do that comfortably by now. If not, you might not be comfortable with writing 2 paragraphs because you might not really know where to start. That's okay. We're going to start with our 1 better answer strategy paragraph right now, and then we'll move on to 2 pretty quickly because I think you guys will get the hang of it. We're going to go through each of these pieces of the better answer strategy right now and talk a little bit more about this. Okay, restate and gist. You use the words from your question to restate, then you add a gist, depending on what your question word is. So we have 3 kind of realms of question words. Hold on one second. Usually if my startup disk is full, then I have to delete something, so pause. Okay, sorry, that should be better. Sometimes I run out of space on my computer with all these videos I'm making. All right, we have 3-ish realms of questions that we can answer using better answer strategy. A why question, a how question, and a what question. Now, also sometimes we get questions that say explain blah, 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 or describe blah, 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 blah. And it's not really a question, but it's telling you to do something. And those go in the realm of a what question. So, for why and how questions, our gists come at the end of our sentence, after our restate. For a why question, we use for many reasons. For a how question, we use in many ways. The way that we remember this is when you have a how question, you say hi. How and I go together. How starts with in many ways, right? And then you just remember that the other one is for many reasons. You can also use things like in 2 ways or in 3 ways or in 1 way, but by the time you get to 4th and 5th grade, you're not going to tell me 2 or 1. You're going to tell me many. So it's better to just use that. You're not going to say like in 6 ways. That would be silly. Don't do that. Then you have what or explain or describe, and those just go at the beginning of the sentence. They go before your restate. And you can either use this is or these are. You have to try those and figure out which one is going to match up with your restate. Are you giving 1 reason or 1 example, or are you giving multiple? Most of the time you're going to use these are, but it depends on the wording of your restate too. So just be careful, make sure it makes sense as you go through. All right. This whole thing with better answer strategy, there's a nice, beautiful formula and equation with it. But in the end, you always have to go back and reread through and make sure that your writing just makes sense. Okay? So here are a couple of examples. How did Harry Potter change throughout the book Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone? Harry Potter changed throughout the book Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. There's my restate. In many ways. There's my gist. Easy enough. Describe how Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape are different. Okay, so my question word is describe, right? So I'm going to use this is or these are. This is, there's my gist, how Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape are different. Now, you can also pick out that how and use that instead and say Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape are different in many ways. You could do that. You just have to, as long as it makes sense, you know? It doesn't really matter as long as it's making sense. And the point is that you don't give your answer in your first question. You restate the question and you give a gist, right? This happened and it's true. And then you don't go into your evidence and reasons yet. All right, and our last one, why does Harry do so many dangerous things throughout his time at Hogwarts? Harry does so many dangerous things throughout his time at Hogwarts. There's my restate. For many reasons. There's my gist. Easy enough. Most of you guys know how to do that already. All right, our next step is our transition and evidence. Now, you have transitions for your first piece of evidence, and then you have transitions for continuing evidence or additional evidence. That first piece of evidence, and it'll be your first piece of evidence in each paragraph, if that makes sense. So your first piece of evidence, you can use transition words like, first of all, to begin with, for instance, for example, for one thing. And then for additional pieces of evidence, you can use in addition, furthermore, the text states, and for another thing. Now, what is evidence? Well, evidence comes from the text. Evidence comes from the text. You can't make up evidence from your brain. That's not evidence. Evidence comes from the text. It's proof. It's something that you can give to your reader to say, this proves my answer. It could be two things. It can be a direct quote in which we would have to use quotation marks around the words that are not yours, around the words that you're getting from the author. You gotta use quotation marks. Or it could be a paraphrase, where we use our own words to restate something that was said directly in the text. Then we don't need to use quotation marks. Paraphrasing in my brain can be a sticky situation, because some of you guys try to paraphrase and you end up explaining the text rather than telling me exactly what happened. So you just have to practice paraphrasing. We have to get used to it. Basically, when you paraphrase, you don't want to make an inference. You want to tell exactly what the text told, but you can tell it in your own words. That kind of makes sense? You just want to make sure that you're not providing an inference in that evidence, because that will come with our next step, which is our explanation. So your explanations have a little kind of equation of their own. They include a mini restate of your prompt. So go back to that restate that you used in the beginning. And then you have to include an explanation of evidence in your own words. Usually there's also a little transition word in there. You mini restate, then you use like because or by, and then you explain the evidence in your own words. This is where your inference comes in. This is where you make sure you answer that question, okay? And your transitions for your explanations include things like this proves, this demonstrates, this supports, this helps me understand, okay? Then we have our conclusion. You need a transition for your conclusion. This is not relevant. Sorry, that was just copied from the previous one. For your conclusion, you need a transition, and then you give your restate again. Now, you want to try not to restate in exactly the same words as you did in that first sentence. You don't want to have the exact same sentence in there. But if you can't figure out another way to say it, then just write the exact same sentence. That's what I tell my students. Sometimes they get so caught up in trying to reconfigure the sentence that it doesn't make sense or introduces new information, and you don't want to do that. So try to change up the wording a little bit in that last restate if you can. If not, just leave it the same. If you're getting overwhelmed, if you're getting confused, if you're getting frustrated, just leave it the same for now. We'll work on that later. Make sense? So your transitions for conclusions also match up with that question word that you were given. If it's a how question, you can write this is how. If it's a why question, this is why. And then you can also use any of these for any question. All in all, in conclusion, as you can see. Okay? All right. So like I said, in 4th and 5th grade, we should really be writing 2 paragraphs to answer every prompt. But for now, we're going to stick with 1 to get back into the writing mood. Watch me do 1, and then you're going to log in to complete your own writing prompt with Google Docs through Google Classroom. This is the rubric that we see that we use at Hazel Park. You get points for your restate and gist. You get points for citing your evidence. So it says all of my relevant, so related to the prompt, text-based comes from the text, evidence, accurately supports the task. It is appropriate and it answers that question. It supports my claim. Evidence is explained. All of my explanations are related to the evidence and the task, right? So that includes that mini restate, plus it explains that evidence. Transitions, did I use transition words? And were they correct, right? Did they make sense? Conclusions. My paragraphs have a strong conclusion that restates my topic again in different words. Then you get points for organization, and this is a little bit different. You don't get these organization points in, hold on, my computer's about to die. Pause. Okay, like I was saying, you don't get those organization points in third grade because you all pretty much always only have one paragraph. Towards the end of third grade, you might start to write two, but you don't get those organization points there. So for organization, we talk about your paragraphs being indented. That's that little tiny space that you start out with. You need to have 3 to 5 sentences in each paragraph. And your topics should be in a logical order. So if you're talking about two different things, you want to follow usually the order that the prompt asks you for them in. And then cups, capitalization, usage, punctuation, and spelling. So that's about your grammatical errors. Capitalization, proper nouns and beginning of sentences. Are my letters capitalized? Usage, are my words being used correctly? Do my sentences make sense? Punctuation. Now, that gets sticky in 4th and 5th grade. You have to include those quotation marks and those commas, as well as the punctuation at the end of your sentences. And then spelling. Did I spell everything or mostly everything correct? What you have to be careful of with spelling is that words in your prompt and words from your text are being spelled correctly, and that your evidence is being spelled correctly. You have it right there in front of you. Okay. So we're going to do an example. Explain the author's point of view about living in the Krakow ghetto during her childhood. Use evidence from the text to support your answer, and be sure to include details about her first-hand account affects the reader's understanding of her point of view. So this is a very leap-like prompt. It's not just a question. It'll never be just a question. You'll have all of these different little things that you have to pay attention to. So the first thing that we want to do is break down our prompt. And we do that in a couple of ways. First, we find that question word. There it is. Explain. Then we want to find what we're restating. What is it asking us to do? We're explaining the author's point of view about living in the Krakow ghetto during her childhood. Then what extra stuff are we being asked to do that's special? I'm not going to underline use evidence because I'm always going to use evidence, but what little extra pieces are we being asked to make sure that we hit on? How her first-hand account affects the reader's understanding of her point of view. I have to make sure that I include that. Where might I include that? In my explanations, right? Make sure I touch on that there. So, my restate and gist. This is, because it's an explain question word. This is the author's point of view about living in the Krakow ghetto during her childhood. I used my words, I restated, I gave a gist. For example, there's my transition word for my evidence. Husbands and fathers were dragged away from their families and people were crying and screaming. There's my evidence. It came straight from the text. It supports the author's point of view, and I'm going to tell you how in a minute. Here's my explanation. This proves, there's my transition word. Now I'm going to do my mini restate. Back up to these words. This proves that the author's point of view about living in the Krakow ghetto during her childhood, that was my restate, right? Now I'm going to use my own words to explain how this piece of evidence answers the question. Was very negative. There's my author's point of view. I made sure to answer the question. And she thought the environment was cruel to the Jews forced to live there, right? This piece of evidence talked about people being dragged from their families and crying and screaming. That supports that the author believes that it was cruel to the Jews. All right, now I'm on to my next piece of evidence. For another thing, the author states that every moment in the Krakow ghetto was dangerous. Any second you could be killed. All right, I'm on to my explanation. Start with my transition. This demonstrates, mini restate, the author shows her feelings of hopelessness and despair about living in the Krakow ghetto during her childhood by telling us personal details and her feelings during that time. Ooh, so there's my support of how that first-hand account affects the reader's understanding of that point of view. Yeah. In addition, now I did 3 pieces of evidence because if we're only writing one paragraph, you should definitely be including 3 pieces of evidence. In addition, in the ghetto, I met a girl who'd become my best friend for life. This shows that while the author's point of view about living in the Krakow ghetto was mostly negative, she did have some positive experiences of meeting her best friend during that time of her childhood. So again, I give that mini restate and the explanation in my own words. Now I'm on to my conclusion. All in all, there's my transition. I'm going to restate, but in a little bit of a different words. All in all, this is the author's point of view about her experiences in the Krakow ghetto during World War II. Right? Just a little bit of different words. I changed out about living in to her experiences in. I changed out during her childhood with World War II, right? Just a little bit of different words. You can sometimes rearrange the sentence. You can find some different words for things just to make it a little bit different. Okay, so I have all pieces of my better answer strategy in there. At this point is when I would go back to the beginning and I would reread all the way through. I would check for cups. I would check that it makes sense. And I would check for a little bit of organization to make sure I can get all of those points from my rubric. Your turn. All right, your question is, how are Eamon Gett and Oskar Schindler different in the way that they carried out their duties as Nazi leaders and soldiers? Use at least 3 pieces of evidence to support your claims. All right, what I'm going to do, oh look, I did it for you. So I broke down your prompt for you. There's your question word, how. And here is your restate. Eamon Gett and Oskar Schindler different in the way that they carried out their duties as Nazi leaders and soldiers. So that's all that you need to know in order to answer this question. Otherwise, you will be able to use the better answer strategy, use all of those pieces in order to answer it. So here's what I did, or what will be done by the time this assignment is posted. You'll have an assignment posted, and it will have your name in the folder in the drive. So it'll make a copy for you automatically already. And it's called Day 8 Explanatory Writing Prompt. So it'll look like this. You'll go in, you'll erase the word name, you'll add your name, because we always want to put name, teacher's name, and class up at the top. Then it gives you the question that it asks you right there. Now, with this video, I'm also going to upload a little anchor chart type thing that has all the transition words listed, every step that you might have to do along the way, so that you can look at to help you as you write, okay? If you have any questions at all as you're writing, comment on this assignment, on this like piece of material that's posted in the Google Classroom, and I can go into your document and check out what you have written, and I can go in and type little comments and help you along the way. So I hope that you guys do this writing assignment. All of you worked really hard in 3rd grade on your writing, and I know that you can do this. And I love to teach this, and I miss teaching this. I miss teaching writing in my classroom. So I hope that you guys are able to practice writing a little bit, even during this time when we're away from school, and I hope that I can help you get through it. All right, good luck, kiddos. Hunker down, get a snack, and start writing, start typing, okay? All right. Love you, miss you, mean it, kiddos. Oh, if you're more comfortable writing, you can always write on a piece of loose leaf first and then type, or just write and send me a picture of it, and I'm happy to help you from there too. Okay? All right, kiddos. Love you, miss you, mean it. See you next week.